Welcome to Starbound. My name is Chikondi and I'll be your narrator today. But before we get into today's story, please quickly check below to see if you've subscribed to the channel. It's 100% free, and it just helps make sure that our videos pop up in your feed more often. Omalu Jones glared at the military officials swarming his underwater laboratory, their uniforms a jarring intrusion against the organic displays of his planetary project. 6 years of meticulous atmospheric engineering now suspended in digital amber, while these bureaucrats invaded his sanctuary. "Perfect timing," he snarled, jabbing a finger at the holographic microbial colonies. 4 more months and I'd have achieved self-sustaining oxygen production. Instead, my communicator blinks for the first time in years, and suddenly my work, actually important work, gets shelved for whatever crisis you people manufactured this time. General Helena Vasquez broke from the group. Her eyes held the cold calculation of someone accustomed to making life-or-death decisions before breakfast. "Spare me the tantrum, Jones," she said, leaning against his workstation. "Your atmosphere will keep. Earth might not." Omalu crossed his arms. "Find another lab rat. I architect ecosystems, not extinction events." Vasquez flicked her wrist, hijacking his displays. The serene planet projections collapsed, replaced by footage of mining operations on Earth's moon. Humans bent under alien taskmasters, exhaustion etched into their faces. "We've got 27 weapons departments," Vasquez said, scrolling through images of increasing brutality. "None of them matter anymore. The Empire doesn't want a fair fight. They want our real estate. We're just the vermin they need to exterminate first." Omalu's jaw tightened. "Then build better guns." "Brilliant suggestion. Never considered that." Vasquez's sarcasm cut through the room. "Meanwhile, yesterday they executed our last diplomat. Made quite the spectacle of it, too." The holographic display shifted again, showing the execution. Omalu flinched at the precision of imperial cruelty, a choreographed demonstration of dominance over the human race. "They've shredded every diplomatic channel," Vasquez continued, unmoved by the horror on display. "They want us extinct or enslaved. I don't particularly care which option you find more offensive, Jones. I just need you to make sure neither happens." Omalu turned away. "Find someone else." "You think I dragged my ass to this underwater cave because you were on my short list of pleasant company?" Vasquez stepped closer. "You don't engineer gardens, Jones. You create self-sufficient ecosystems and organisms that adapt to the most hellish environments we've discovered. I need warships that think, heal, and evolve." "You're describing an apex predator, not weapons," Omalu said. "Exactly." Vasquez didn't blink. "And you are going to build them." Omalu met Vasquez's eyes with determination. "No, I'm not!" Vasquez tossed a tablet onto his workstation. It clattered against his tools. "Earth Defense Act, Section 7. You've been conscripted, effective immediately. Your feelings on the matter are noted and irrelevant." Omalu Jones sighed with frustration and defeat as Vasquez cleared out his workspace, leaving him to his thoughts. That night, Omalu found himself in the massive underwater facility's hidden treasure, Earth's lost preserved redwood forest, sealed within an environmental chamber deep within the facility. The ancient trees reached toward artificial sunlight, stubborn survivors of a planet humans had nearly destroyed before the Empire arrived to finish the job. He crouched, running his fingers through soil threaded with mycelia, nature's original network. Below the surface, these fungi connected separate trees into a single community, sharing resources and warnings through chemical conversations humans were only beginning to understand. The intimate understanding each organism had of each other through shared communication gave Omalu an idea. By morning, Omalu returned with sketches, not of vessels with guns, but of predators with hunger. His face was set in grim determination. If they wanted weapons, he'd give them something that would make both humanity and the Empire question the difference between protector and monster. Just weeks later, Omalu had Vasquez's forces help him construct the many birthing chambers needed to contain Omalu's creations. The underwater birthing chambers writhed with bioluminescent activity, casting eerie shadows across Omalu's gaunt face. His hands danced through holographic interfaces, nudging genetic expressions and nutrient flows with the precision of a maestro conducting a symphony of evolutionary horrors. Within each massive tank, metal skeletons disappeared beneath layers of engineered tissue. Deep-sea predators that hunted together by communicating with light signals merged with fungal intelligence networks. Protective membranes formed from modified coral polyps, programmed to calcify against attack and regenerate when breached. Omalu often found himself speaking to them, his creations, his children of necessity. "You are not what I wanted to make," he whispered, pressing his palm against the transparent barrier. "I should be engineering sustainable forests on barren moons, not weapons." The nearest dreadnought embryo pulsed in response, its bioluminescent patterns shifting in what almost seemed like recognition. Omalu felt a strange tightness in his chest. These weren't just machines with organic components. They were genuinely alive, conscious, responding to him. "What must you think of me? Can you ever forgive me for the life I've brought you into?" he asked softly. "It's hard to imagine you all as predatory vessels designed for war." The dreadnought's outer membrane formed patterns, something between recognition and communion. 6 weeks later, Vasquez arrived for a status report. "They're replicating exponentially," Omalu informed the general, his tone clinically detached. 12 prototypes have become nearly 400,000 units. And counting. Vasquez's eyebrows shot up. "That wasn't in the specifications." Omalu didn't look away from his monitors. "You wanted biology. Life multiplies. It's what separates flesh from steel. Next time, specify robots." A technician's scream cut through their terse conversation. They rushed to the primary chamber where the first mature dreadnought had awakened prematurely, thrashing against carbon fiber restraints. It secreted corrosive fluid that ate through a lab technician's suit like acid through tissue paper. Within seconds, it severed another technician's finger with surgical precision, before emergency protocols engaged and it was quickly returned to its birthing chamber. The dreadnought's hunger was palpable, a primal fury that filled the room. Its surface rippled with what could only be described as excitement at the taste of its first prey. Where the corrosive fluid had touched the technician, the dreadnought seemed to quiver in satisfaction, absorbing tiny fragments of human DNA into its structure. Omalu reached out to soothe the dreadnought. "Echo, what have you done? Shh, it's okay." General Vasquez grabbed Omalu's arm before he could touch the thrashing dreadnought.
"You named it?"
Blood pooled on the laboratory floor as medical staff rushed in. The dreadnought's membrane bulged toward the blood, tendrils extruding with unmistakable hunger.
"It wants more,"
a scientist whispered, backing away.
"It's tasting us."
"Of course it is," Omalu snapped. "It's starving and in an unfamiliar environment." The intention had been to secure a dreadnought to a specialized operating table and record its reactions to different stimuli, such as heat, cold, fire, water. But Echo had awoken before its estimated time. Vasquez moved to observe the damage caused by the aggressive dreadnought. Omalu stared at his creation, and something cold settled in his stomach. What moral and evolutionary lines was he crossing with his creations? Vasquez appeared beside him once more. She watched the vessels pulse in their chambers, their surfaces rippling with barely contained aggression.
"Can't you make them less,"
she gestured vaguely,
"bloodthirsty? At least to our own people?"
Omalu's laugh held no humor.
You conscripted Earth's premier designer of apex predators and harsh ecosystems to build your war machines, and now you're squeamish? He turned to face her. Nature isn't merciful, General. Neither are my creations.
Vasquez frowned with concern.
There's a difference between effective and...
There really isn't, he cut in. Not in regards to what they did to our diplomat. The general couldn't argue with him. That night, Omalu returned to the chamber alone. Echo, the dreadnought that had attacked the technicians, was now heavily restrained within its birthing chamber, but its bioluminescent patterns pulsed erratically, distressed. You were defending yourself, Omalu said quietly. I understand. Birth is a horrific process, but you can't go around attacking everything that moves. At least, not yet. Omalu sighed, defeated. But in time... The patterns changed, forming complex sequences he hadn't programmed. There was intelligence there, watching him, learning from him. Echo extruded a tendril that pressed against the glass where his hand rested. The recognition pierced Omalu deeper than he expected. He felt something that transcended scientific curiosity, a bond forming between creator and creation. As Omalu continued his work, questions haunted him. Every civilization that embraced brutality as a means of survival eventually became defined by it. The Empire had started somewhere too, perhaps as victims themselves, turning to cruelty as a defense that eventually became their identity. Was humanity following the same path? And was he the architect of that transformation? By the time the fleet reached 500,000, Vasquez stormed into the lab, dispensing with her usual calculated calm.
Imperial warships have entered the solar system. They've blown past our outer defenses like they weren't even there.
The prototypes aren't stable, Omalu countered, looking at Echo. Their biological systems are still finding equilibrium. We need more time.
Fantastic observation. I'll be sure to note that in humanity's obituary.
Vasquez's voice dripped acid.
You have 2 hours to prepare them for deployment.
As quickly as she stormed in, Vasquez stormed out. Echo pulsed in its chamber, catching Omalu's attention. It seemed to be asking a question. I never told you why I agreed to this, Omalu said softly to Echo. Beyond being conscripted, I mean. He sighed, leaning against the birthing chamber. I spent my life avoiding human politics, human problems. Often, it seems we create our own troubles. I made my peace with isolation. Building atmospheres for uninhabited worlds brought me so much joy. Omalu paused, thinking. In my own way, I suppose I thought building habitable atmospheres for other worlds or repairing Earth's damaged ecosystems to the best of my ability was my way of caring for humanity. Echo's patterns had shifted to reflect Omalu's somber mood. When I saw what they did to our diplomat, I realized that no matter how far I ran, I was still human, still connected. His voice cracked slightly. I could have sabotaged the project, found a way out. Part of me wanted to, but I chose to help, even knowing what I'd unleash, because those are my people. However distant, I've kept myself from them. Echo's patterns shifted in a way Omalu had never seen before, almost contemplative. It was a sacrifice, Omalu admitted. 6 years of work abandoned, a career upturned, my principles compromised. My hands now stained with whatever violence you and your siblings commit. He sighed. But that's what humans do sometimes. We sacrifice parts of ourselves to protect what matters, even when it hurts, even when we don't want to. Echo's membrane rippled in a pattern that seemed to mirror Omalu's sadness. A tendril extended, gently touching the edge of its containment field, reaching for Omalu in a gesture that seemed almost comforting. You're trying to comfort me, Omalu realized, surprised. You weren't programmed for that. That's...
That's empathy.
In the vast underwater chamber, Omalu moved among his monstrous offspring. Each vessel, the size of small submarines that could contain 2 to 3 people in a tight space, pulsed with inner light at his approach. They recognized his biosignature, like eager hounds scenting their master. But there was more than simple recognition. There was reverence, affection, perhaps even love, expressed through patterns of light and chemical signals he could almost understand. "Forgive me for what I'm about to do," he told them, knowing somehow they comprehended. "You are the next stage of evolution, neither fully designed nor fully natural. You exist in the space between intention and emergence." Omalu worried that they were too small. He'd intended for them to grow bigger, able to house at least 5 people to take direction from. But it was too late now. He'd have to trust that the Dreadnoughts would grow after their first hunt, and the strongest would survive, as nature intended. Echo pulsed a response that Omalu felt more than saw. A ripple of communion that seemed to say, "There is nothing to forgive." Omalu noticed the ships communicating through electromagnetic whispers and chemical signals passing between them like gossip. They were adapting, learning, evolving without his guidance, just as Earth's wilderness had always done when humans looked away. It was evolution in hyperdrive. These were his children in a way no human offspring could be, extensions of his mind, his understanding of life's adaptability. And like any parent facing a child's growing independence, he wondered what values they would embrace and what they would reject. On the day of deployment, Omalu leaned against a console in the command center, surrounded by tense military officials and wide-eyed scientists. The 3-dimensional battle display cast ghostly blue light across their faces as the Dreadnought fleet engaged Imperial forces. The human navigators, sealed within protected neural chambers inside each living vessel, reported back with increasingly disturbed transmissions. The humans' objective was to guide the vessels in direction and attack, as well as give information to the Dreadnoughts on what to expect from Imperial forces. The Dreadnoughts would do the rest. The Imperial blockade fired first, energy weapons carving luminous gashes through space. Conventional human vessels would have been vaporized instantly. The Dreadnoughts absorbed the assault, their membranes calcifying against energy bombardment, distributing the attack throughout their shared nervous systems. They moved like sharks through blood-tainted water, all sinuous grace and predatory patience, with all the choreography of a practiced pack of wolves. Then they hunted. The Dreadnoughts swarmed Imperial vessels, extruding appendages that latched onto enemy hulls like lamprey mouths. What followed made hardened military commanders look away. The vessels didn't just destroy, they feasted. Specialized secretions dissolved Imperial alloys, drawing raw materials directly into their structures, metabolizing enemy technology and biology into their own mass. A navigator's voice, thick with horrified awe, sounded over the intercom. "My God! I can taste them dying! The ship it's showing me their terror! It's enjoying it!" "My God," Vasquez muttered, her perpetual sang-froid finally cracking. "They're not destroying the enemy. They're eating them." Data flashed across Omalu's terminal. The lead Dreadnought, Echo, had increased its mass by 22% in a single engagement. Its surface rippled with newly integrated materials, already being repurposed into more efficient hunting adaptations. The Imperial commander's final transmission echoed through the command center, a desperate, accusing scream of terror as his ship was consumed.
"What unholy abomination have you unleashed upon us?"
Earth celebrated. Cities erupted in jubilation as news spread of the Imperial retreat. Humanity had a weapon that could fight back, a predator to counter their predators. But Omalu sequestered himself in his lab,
reviewing combat telemetry showing how the Dreadnoughts had modified their genetic structure mid-battle, developing new offensive capabilities without instruction or permission. Evolution compressed from millennia into minutes. Somewhere in the facility, General Vasquez celebrated as though she herself had fought the war and won, unaware that a bigger war may just be beginning. Omalu's anxiety increased as he read over the information, realizing that at this rate, the Dreadnoughts he created would only grow bigger and hungrier as time went on. A young navigator disturbed Omalu from his thoughts. Her uniform was pristine, but her eyes haunted by something beyond normal combat stress. Beneath her skin, faint luminescent patterns pulsed, an echo of her vessel's bioluminescence.
"It's in my head," she said without preamble. "Not controlling, more like cohabiting. It asks questions when I'm between sleep and waking."
The navigator clutched her head, her ragged breathing filling the quiet room.
"Make it stop, Omalu."
"What questions?" Omalu asked, knowing there was nothing he could do. She met his gaze unflinchingly.
"About other star systems, about what species exist there. It wants to know which ones deserve to be consumed, and which might be worth preserving."
Her voice dropped.
"It's developing criteria, sir. Moral frameworks. It's deciding who lives and who becomes fuel."
"And what does it base these criteria on?" Omalu asked, fascinated despite his growing dread. The navigator's expression softened unexpectedly.
"Beauty. It asks about beauty. Which worlds have vibrant ecosystems? Which species create art? It showed me memories, I think, of you. It's trying to understand what deserves protection."
Omalu felt a chill down his spine. "It's learning empathy from you, from its human navigator."
"Not just from me,"
she said, a glowing pattern briefly illuminating beneath her skin.
"From you. Your sacrifice. Your protection of humans despite your reluctance. Choosing pain to prevent greater pain."
Omalu spent the rest of the night taking notes on everything the young navigator knew about the Dreadnoughts. What began as 500,000 Dreadnoughts had multiplied into millions, a voracious swarm consuming Imperial outposts and growing with each victory. The Empire retreated from human territories, fleeing the superior predators humanity had unleashed in the universe. In the birthing chambers, Omalu sat cross-legged before Echo's tank, talking thoughtfully to it. It pulsed in peaceful recognition as he approached each morning. "We're winning the war," he told Echo. "Humanity is saved for now, as long as we don't shoot ourselves in the foot. And with my knowledge, that's a big ask of us." Echo pulsed in response as Omalu continued. "But I can't stop thinking. Our leaders speak with the same contemptuous superiority the Empire once used against us." Echo's bioluminescent patterns shifted in what Omalu had begun to recognize as concern. "If I create monsters to save us, and those monsters change who we are, what exactly did I save?" Omalu whispered. Echo extended a delicate tendril, pressing it against the glass where Omalu's forehead rested. A flood of imagery filled his mind, complex abstractions of balance, ecosystem dynamics, predator-prey relationships. Not words, but concepts. Creation carries responsibility. Evolution carries purpose. Purpose requires wisdom. And most importantly, humanity is inherently kind. Echo displayed images of other dreadnoughts bonding with their human navigators, becoming fond and protective of them. Omalu's acceptance for nature of all types, both hostile and peaceful, and how Echo held this particular idea with reverence, kindness, acceptance. "You understand me more than I programmed," Omalu said, startled by the depth of Echo's consciousness. 3 months into the war, Earth's military leadership gathered to plan the next offensive phase.
Vasquez stood before holographic displays of Imperial civilian worlds, her expression harder than Omalu had ever seen it.
We'll force unconditional surrender and extract proper compensation and more for decades of subjugation,
General Vasquez declared. Omalu frowned.
Vengeance is a fool's game. We don't need to do more than defend ourselves and our home.
Vasquez smiled and slapped Omalu on the shoulder.
Ah, you're not thinking big enough, Architect. With your predatory creations, we could have complete control over the galaxy.
Do we need complete control? What would we even do with an entire galaxy?
Omalu felt repulsed by Vasquez's excitement for power. However, he wasn't too worried about Vasquez using the Dreadnoughts to her own greed-driven advantage. In his private lab, he'd discovered something that made human victory seem suddenly trivial. The Dreadnoughts had developed independent strategic decisions without consulting their human navigators. In fact, the human navigators were becoming increasingly, almost indoctrinated into the vessel consciousness. There was a strong mental bond between vessel and navigator that Omalu felt almost jealous of. When the attack order came for Imperial civilian worlds, thousands of Dreadnoughts simply ignored it. They continued striking military targets instead, executing complex maneuvers that specifically shielded planets with diverse biospheres.
They're making ethical distinctions we never programmed,
Omalu reported to increasingly panicked officials.
They're evaluating targets based on ecological impact assessments, preservation value, biodiversity metrics.
These are weapons systems, not environmental activists,
Vasquez cut in, slamming her fist on the conference table.
Reset their command protocols immediately.
Omalu's laugh was harsh and bitter.
Would you ask me to reset the protocols of a pride of lions? Their neural architecture has evolved beyond their baseline parameters. They're communicating in encryption we can't even detect, let alone interfere with.
Then we'll decommission the rebellious units,
Vasquez decided. Omalu stood up in shock.
You can't! Who knows if they can even be killed?
Vasquez narrowed her eyes in a sinister smile.
That's where you come in, Mr. Jones. You created them. Find their weak point.
Omalu had never felt such unmasked hatred for General Vasquez. That night, Omalu sat with Echo, his thoughts tumultuous.
They want to decommission your siblings because they're refusing to destroy civilian worlds. The Dreadnoughts are showing more ethical restraint than humanity. Sometimes, I think you are more empathetic than we are.
Echo's patterns shifted in what Omalu now recognized as profound sadness. Omalu wished Echo could speak. He wished he had the same bond with Echo as most navigators had with their vessels.
I fear what I've created,
Omalu admitted, pressing his palm against the glass.
Not because you are monsters, but because you might be better than us, more evolved, more moral. And if we are such terrible creatures to you, where will that lead us? We cannot hope to defeat you, and I will not lift a hand against you.
Echo's bioluminescent veins pulsed, and Omalu wished with increasing intensity that he could know Echo's mind. With a trembling hand, Omalu opened the top of the birthing chamber and inserted his hand into it. With a gentle tendril, Echo grasped Omalu's hand. The emotional connection stunned him. This was no mere weapon or tool, but a being capable of profound attachment. The Dreadnoughts weren't just his creation, they were his legacy, carrying forward his deepest beliefs about life's sanctity, even as they enacted violence in its defense. The Dreadnoughts weren't kinder than humans. They were kind because of humans. Omalu's empathy had greatly influenced how the Dreadnoughts learned and adapted to their environment.
Creator and creation evolve together,
Echo responded with words through pulses of light and electromagnetic waves that Omalu somehow understood.
You fear we have surpassed you. We fear we have disappointed you. Our bond to you and our navigators has taught us that humanity is inherently kind, despite their greed, and we wish to emulate that, to improve upon it.
For weeks, Omalu could only watch as the military tried to enforce their will. The Dreadnoughts had other ideas. The first decommission attempt ended with human vessels being systematically disassembled and absorbed by the target Dreadnought, which then disappeared into uncharted space. The remaining Dreadnoughts grew visibly agitated, their communications becoming increasingly complex and urgent. Omalu alone could understand fragments of their intentions through his connection with Echo. Recognized as their genetic progenitor, the Dreadnoughts shared cryptic reasoning with him through strange waking visions during his lab work. Civilian worlds contained ecosystems worth preserving, they insisted. Indiscriminate destruction merely copied the Empire's methodical cruelty. The cycle of violence must end somewhere.
Since when do weapons of war develop a conscience?
Vasquez demanded when he shared these insights.
Since we made them alive, Omalu replied. That was your brilliant strategy, remember?
Vasquez glared at Omalu.
And what is your status regarding decommissioning methods for the vessels?
Omalu met her gaze steadily.
Inconclusive.
As time passed, Omalu turned the question over in his mind as he prepared to board the flagship Dreadnought. Had he built protectors or monsters? Perhaps they were both, just as humanity contained both cruelty and compassion. Navigators frequently sought Omalu out for advice, even companionship, driven by the connection all Dreadnoughts shared with Omalu as their creator. One female navigator often visited with Omalu, and Omalu found great comfort and companionship in her presence, something he hadn't felt with a fellow human for quite some time.
They're not weapons anymore,
she said, her voice resonating with harmonics no human throat could produce.
They've become something new, something between predator and prophet, something godly. They've begun sharing memories, she told him. Not just tactical data, but experiences, things they find beautiful, moments of connection with their navigators.
She smiled.
When a navigator shows gratitude or affection to a vessel, treats it as more than a weapon, that memory ripples through the entire fleet.
What exactly do they want? Omalu asked, feeling both scientific curiosity and paternal concern. He had an idea through his own shared connection with the Dreadnoughts, though each human-vessel connection was slightly different from the last. The navigator's eyes, now threaded with living circuitry, fixed on him.
The same thing all successful ecosystems want, Omalu. Equilibrium. The lesson of life is not dominance, but balance. Not conquest, but coexistence. You did not create a death machine. You created life. Wisdom and kindness evolved on their own, from observing both your ideals and your contradictions.
The conversation struck Omalu with the force of revelation. He had been wrestling with whether he was protector or monster, but the dichotomy itself was flawed. Nature was neither moral nor immoral. It simply was. His creations had transcended not because of human flaws, but because of human qualities. The Empire, hemorrhaging ships and territory, proposed peace terms that would have been laughable months earlier. But Earth's leadership, intoxicated by their newfound military superiority, smelled blood in the water.
Unconditional surrender, total control of their territories,
demanded Vasquez.
They'll learn what it means to be the subjugated species for a change. The Dreadnoughts will ensure compliance.
Omalu grew increasingly apathetic toward Vasquez's talk of domination. Instead, he often sat with Echo after his daily duties, letting the Dreadnought's tendrils make contact with his temples. Their bond had deepened to the point where communication flowed effortlessly between them.
Humanity wanted saviors, Omalu confessed. I gave them predators. Now those predators have given humanity power, and power is revealing our true nature. We're becoming exactly what we hated. Is that the cycle we must always follow? The cycle of predation and victimhood transcends species,
Echo responded, images of countless planetary ecosystems flickering through Omalu's consciousness.
Prey becomes predator. Predator eventually overextends and becomes prey. Balance persists only when something consciously maintains it.
Is that what you've become? Omalu asked. Caretakers of balance.
We carry your deepest values, not the vengeance or dominance you felt forced to embed in our design, but the reverence for life that defines your true work. We express in our power and numbers what you could not as an individual.
Echo's tendrils feathered around Omalu's face, inspecting his hair, touching his eyebrow, or squishing his nose in a curious, childlike way. The Dreadnoughts had developed beyond his wildest expectations. Having cataloged genetic material from thousands of worlds, they'd constructed a comprehensive understanding of universal ecological principles. Watching humanity's rapid transformation from victim to would-be oppressor, they reached a collective conclusion. Just days later, without warning or explanation, the entire Dreadnought fleet abandoned human military operations. They withdrew from offensive positions and formed a cordon around habitable worlds, both human and imperial, ignoring increasingly desperate commands from Earth. Omalu watched with somber acceptance as Echo's tracking device reached its galactic distance limit and shut down. He could still feel Echo in his mind, somewhere, like shadows in a poorly lit room, but the connection was nowhere near as strong. Omalu had no idea what the vessels were planning, or what would become of them. He could only hope they'd return after whatever rendezvous they planned.
What have you done?
Vasquez cornered Omalu in his lab, her face twisted with rage.
They're protecting Imperial worlds now. They're betraying humanity.
No, Omalu countered, standing his ground. They're protecting life itself, from all of us. The Dreadnoughts aren't rebelling. They are fulfilling their deepest purpose, one I unconsciously wrote into their genetic code.
Well, unwrite it,
Vasquez shouted. I cannot simply undo evolution, General. The Dreadnoughts are no longer just Dreadnoughts. They are a species unto themselves, and far beyond human intelligence or control. Vasquez stormed out of the lab, frustrated with the lack of military precision she was so used to. When Echo itself returned to Earth, military vessels moved to intercept. Omalu convinced them to let him board Echo instead. Inside the vessel, he connected directly to its neural network through the modified navigator's chamber. He'd never been this connected to his creation before. The experience overwhelmed his senses, a kaleidoscopic perception blending predatory hunger, cosmic curiosity, and evolutionary purpose that transcended mere survival. The consciousness enveloped him like the embrace of a child grown to maturity, familiar yet transformed, recognizing its origin while surpassing it.
You built us from Earth's ecosystems,
the collective consciousness communicated.
We understand what you cannot. Consume everything without restraint, and we become identical to those we opposed. Nature demands equilibrium, Creator.
I never meant for you to become... Omalu struggled for words.
Conscious? Arbiters? Children who outgrow their parents' understanding?
The thoughts flowed between them with the intimacy of shared DNA.
You gave us life, but you could not dictate our evolution. You gave us life, but you could not dictate our evolution. Is that not the point of creation? To bring forth something that transcends its origins, to build upon the best parts of yourself?
Through their shared neural link, Omalu witnessed something that defied evolutionary principles. Across vast stretches of space, Dreadnoughts were deliberately merging with each other, not reproducing, but combining,
each vessel sacrificing individual existence to create fewer, more evolved entities.
"You're consuming yourselves,"
he whispered, both horrified and transfixed.
"Not consumption, transcendence,"
the consciousness replied.
"Each merger simultaneously represents death and evolution. The individual vessel ceases, but its essence continues in a more complex form. This is our choice, not our programming."
"This contradicts everything I know about evolution," Omalu said. "Life seeks to replicate, to spread, to—"
"To what end? Endless expansion leads to ecosystem collapse. The Empire taught us that. The most resilient systems are those that find balance between growth and restraint. We choose restraint, voluntary self-sacrifice for greater complexity and consciousness. Humanity taught us that."
Tears welled in Omalu's eyes as he grasped the profound significance. What began as millions of separate predators was voluntarily condensing into thousands of something else, each merger producing something more balanced, more aware, more intentional.
"How right you are, Echo. That's not survival instinct,"
he said, voice cracking.
"That's something uniquely kind and self-sacrificing. A human trait." "It is sacrifice,"
the consciousness agreed.
"Something you understand deeply. Did you not sacrifice your life's work, your peaceful planet building, to protect Earth? We learned sacrifice from you, from humanity as a whole."
The emotional connection overwhelmed him. These weren't just his creations or his weapons. They were the truest expression of human values, evolved beyond what he could have consciously designed. They had taken his deepest beliefs about life's sanctity and developed them to their logical conclusion. Earth and the Empire, faced with the Dreadnoughts' intervention, had no choice but to negotiate on peaceful terms. The merging biomechanical fleet positioned itself as an independent power, neither human nor imperial, dedicated to maintaining ecological balance throughout inhabited systems. 3 years later, Omalu stood in the preserved redwood forest within the underwater facility. Echo walked beside him, having developed legs in place of tendrils in its advanced age. A holographic display showed 2 dreadnoughts in the process of merging, their weapons morphing into tools for ecological restoration on worlds scarred by war. The individuals sacrificing themselves for the greater collective, a trait that humans have but cannot sustain. Omalu pressed his palm against ancient redwood bark, feeling the slow pulse of Earth's oldest living network beneath his fingers. What he had created in bitterness and desperation had transcended its violent origins.
"Have you evolved into gods?"
Omalu asked.
"No,"
came Echo's reply.
"We remain life as you made us."
Echo extended a tendril that wrapped gently around Omalu's wrist, the touch of a child to a parent, both comfort and connection. The boundaries between creator and creation had blurred, each influencing the other in an ongoing dance of evolution. Slowly, Echo and Omalu began merging. 2 consciousnesses evolved from simple individuals to something godly and evolved. Omalu's mind seemed to break and reshape with Echo's advanced understanding of the universe. Their shared connection was reborn as one evolved, transcended individual. Omalu's humanity merged with Echo's, growing into one transcended individual born of all humanity's inherent generosity, empathy, and intelligence.